There's so many people out there who will tell you, make sure make sure a breastfeeding session takes only an hour, and make sure you put them down before they're asleep, and make sure you do this and make sure you do that. They have to learn, babies have to learn. But the thing is, you're the mom, let your heart take care of your baby. You can take the advice, grab the advice, choose what works for you. And if something doesn't feel right to you, don't do it.
All right. This week, you guys, I have a birth story episode for you. And it's special because we've got Dad here as well. So with that, Sara and Matthew, we take a moment, introduce yourself, tell us a little about you, how many kids you have, all that fun stuff.
Hi, Sara and Matthew Berry. We're in Southern California in Vista. We have one little girl. She's our first, 6 months old already. I can't believe it. She'll be 6 months tomorrow.
Crazy.
He's an electrical engineer, and I get to stay at home and be a mom, which was my dream.
Very cool. Well, we're excited that you guys are here today. And thank you, Dad, for being here, because I love that side of the story too, pulling that in. And I think dads love to hear from dads. So that's awesome. I like to start with the pregnancy. So I just love to tell me a little bit about your pregnancy and what that was like. Anything unique, any concerns that you guys had? Walk me through your pregnancy.
I would say probably it all started before we even tried to conceive, because I didn't have very good health at first, and we had to bring me back up to kind of normal before we got there. So a lot of the pregnancy was preparation before we even started. So I was doing things like trying to get to walking 3 miles a day, just like you said, and I was trying to squat. I got to squatting 10 minutes.
Yes, that's so good.
Little one is grabbing the headphones, and I started taking probiotics and trying to avoid. A big part of my health journey and healing was avoiding EMFs. Actually, it was probably like the key factor was cutting out the cell phone radiation, and listening to your podcasts. Your podcast was the first one I found, and I started listening to it while I was going on my walks, and I loved a lot of the episodes. I didn't get all of them in like some of them do, but there were certain episodes that I listened to multiple times just because I wanted it to really sink in. So then when we felt like, okay, I'm ready. We're gonna go ahead and go for this. Then I started sitting on a yoga ball every day. I would sit at the computer on my yoga ball and try to make sure my posture was really good. And what else was I doing? I was stretching every day. I was getting really good nutrition. This guy was great at helping me with the nutrition. He was finding all the wheatgrass powders, and I was doing 100 grams of protein a day even before we were pregnant, just trying to preload everything. And then when we did find out we were pregnant, it happened pretty quickly. We didn't have to wait too long. I was grateful for that. But I feel like I had a little bit of all of the symptoms. I mean, nausea, mood swings. Apparently, I was a fire-breathing dragon, according to some. I didn't know it at the time, but I've heard stories.
I love that.
Let's see. So the first trimester was definitely nausea, and I had aversions to all of the foods that I eat normally. So we eat a lot of salad, and I could not look at a salad. In fact, I didn't know I was having an aversion until I was opening up a cucumber. And I looked at the cucumber and I thought, I think this cucumber is bad. I'm going to set that aside and let Matt smell it when he gets home. So I opened up a second cucumber and I thought, this one's bad too. It must be a bad bag. I opened a third cucumber and thought, I'm not going to eat this. This one's bad. And by the time he got home, he had 3 cucumbers to eat.
Waiting in the fridge with notes on them. Are these bad, honey?
Yeah.
So I had a lot of cucumbers that night because they were all fine.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And then, so that would, first trimester I started with Braxton Hicks quite a bit. I'm very sensitive. So I think it had to do with drinking red raspberry leaf tea. And I had to actually back off on drinking that because it was starting the Braxton Hicks, which I had the entire pregnancy, the whole darn time, every time I took a walk. It was really weird. It feels like my stomach is tightening without me doing anything. all of a sudden I realized, hey, my stomach is tight. And sometimes it would take my breath away. I got in second trimester super itchy, like incredibly itchy all over my skin. And I had I made a special oil out of jojoba oil and olive oil and coconut oil and rosehip oil and some castor oil and a little bit of lavender oil, all sorts of oils that I put together. And I started rubbing that on my skin and it helped. And because I used it the whole entire time, I didn't get any stretch marks. And my sister hates me because, that's a thing. But I'm so grateful. I still used that after birth too. And it feels really good to rub on your skin. I drank a ton of water too.
Yes.
Drinking a ton
Sarah's
of water.
very good about drinking lots of water. And it helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, let's see. It was pretty normal. I feel like I kind of experienced the full range of normal symptoms in pregnancy. The fatigue at the beginning, then the energy in the middle, and then the fatigue again at the end. My walking slowly decreased at the end there. It was the heat of summer, and I was doing a couple miles up until close to the end, and then I had to back down. But I felt pretty good. I felt confident, and I had a lot of confidence from all the information I was incorporating. I was just consuming so much. I would go on a walk and listen to 1 or 2 of your podcasts. And then I started branching out to other podcasts as well. And I would come home from my walk all pumped, like, Matt, did you know that, your blood volume doubles and that's why your heart is working so hard? And
I heard all your podcasts inadvertently from Sara just relaying all the excitement.
I love it.
And I would
have to bring her on as a co-host now.
I would give him quizzes. I would say, guess what, Matt? Okay. Say they're going to suggest an episiotomy. What are you going to do? And then I put him on the spot.
I love it.
Yeah, I had a whole list of all my preferences all ready to go, probably like first trimester. Okay, we're going to do this. We're not going to do that. We're going to do it. I had it all lined up, and I was so grateful that he and I were on the same page with that. That was something huge. I mean, huge.
Yeah, no, that's really great. You can't do it if you're not on the same page. It just isn't going to work. Mm-hmm. So that's great. Mm-hmm. Are you comfortable? You do not have to if you do not want to. Are you comfortable sharing what health issues you were dealing with that you felt like you needed to resolve first?
Yeah, I think we finally nailed it down as mitochondria fatigue, kind of a chronic fatigue. It was stress-induced. I was taking care of my disabled niece for a couple of years before I met this guy. And basically my niece was born with a genetic defect. She didn't come home from the hospital till she was 6 months old. And she had quite a few surgeries already, still more lined up. And through that journey of just being the secondary caregiver for her and taking care of my sister and brother-in-law's other girls, my sister would go to the hospital one day, I would go to the hospital the next day just to spend time with my niece and learn how to care for her and be there for her. We both grew quite a bit from the point of being passengers and just, doing whatever the doctors and nurses told us to do. And, they come in and they're the experts too. Over the course of 6 months, we became the experts, and they would come in and we would start telling them what to do. And that was a huge personal growth journey, but also a lot of stress, so much so that, when she came home, we were still saving her life multiple times a day, and I couldn't handle the stress. I broke myself. And I know now why Jesus tells us to be anxious for nothing, but in everything, with prayer and supplication, give your requests to the Lord, put them in his hands and leave them there. Because I didn't leave them in the Lord's hands, and I broke myself with the stress. So as soon as I got married, he started helping me with recovery. And it was just a long journey of trying this, trying that. A lot of chlorophyll, a lot of salads, cutting out a lot of elimination diet. And then resetting the circadian rhythm, make sure you're getting sleep. Sleep is huge. It's so, I didn't know or understand how much a good night's sleep has to do with your health.
Yeah.
The other
really
aspect was, as she mentioned earlier, elimination of electromagnetic fields. So limiting cell phone usage, Wi-Fi usage, just that. Some people are very sensitive to that. We learned that Sara is sensitive to EMFs. And so that was another.
Yeah. How did you guys come about? How did that come about?
I actually joined a program that was teaching about it, but there's also quite a few books. There's EMF, the book out there. There's you hear snippets of it through different podcasts, honestly. Kind of the health community out there is talking about it now, especially with 5G. When 5G came out, it became a topic of conversation. And the first step was just trying it and saying, okay, well, we've tried everything else. Why not try this too? So when I was pregnant, I tried to stay away from EMS as much as possible and tried to keep my phone off my belly. I wasn't scrolling my phone on my belly because I can just see if I'm this sensitive, I don't want to give her a brain tumor or something before she even has a chance. With all the cancers that are so prevalent in kids nowadays. I don't think that was something that they were dealing with 100 years ago. So, yeah, it was trial and error. The answer to your question is trial and error. Like trying everything. I'm finally coming up with a concoction that really worked. I'm doing so much better. So much better.
Good.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Can we kind of dive into your providers and closer towards the end of your pregnancy? So what kind of provider did you choose? Did you choose midwife, OB, in hospital, out of hospital?
We absolutely went for a midwife. I toyed with the idea of a home birth. And then we decided, you know what, we're maybe not quite ready for that for the first time. I looked up birth centers. And there were a couple nearby, and I chose the one based off the fact that she wanted, she looked so friendly. She looked so friendly online, and her birth center there were 2 birth centers nearby, and one of them talked about mothers, and the other talked about birthing people. And I wanted the one that was going to talk about me as a mother, not as a birthing person, because I felt like I would receive honest care from her. And when, I know you said, go ahead and interview a whole bunch of different ones just to make sure. But I knew right away. The moment I started talking to Tamara, the midwife, I just felt so comfortable. She made me feel so comfortable. And almost before I would say a preference, and almost before it was out of my mouth, she would nod and say, yep, we do that.
That's awesome. Well, and I love that you shared that too, because you absolutely can have that experience where you're like, nope, that's my midwife, so that's awesome. So that was in hospital with a midwife, and
no, birth center
sorry.
Independent birth center.
Birth center with a midwife. And what did it look like for you coming up to your guest date? Was there any talk of induction? Did you choose to have vaginal exams? Like, what did it look like getting closer to the end of your pregnancy?
I said no vaginal exams whatsoever, and she was okay with that. I said no GBS test, and she was not okay with that, but, respected my choice, and Matt was on board with that too. So we went ahead and even found a placenta encapsulation lady that really, supported that as well. And I started taking probiotics and garlic heavy to support that on my end. We only did 2 ultrasounds to limit, again, any sort of waves. And because I was always on the yoga ball, and even I would do your 3 exercises daily, except for towards the end, the 3rd trimester, the squatting didn't feel right. And so I had to stop because it just felt wrong. And I'm not sure why that is, but she was very low. I carried her very low, very centered. The midwife was giving me spinning babies massages just to make sure she was in the right position. And, no, we never talked about induction. Granted, my family has a history of giving birth at 38 weeks. And my mom and my sister both gave birth to us kids at 38 weeks. And so around 36 weeks, I started red raspberry leaf tea again, and I ate dates. I'm very sensitive, so I just had 2 instead of 6. But by 37 weeks, I was getting hefty Braxton Hicks, hefty. So it was more of a game of let's keep her in rather than let's get her out.
And then how about Dad, like walking you kind of through all of this or hearing your side of the story? What was it like for you, especially with her interviewing midwives and stuff? She said you guys were on the same page. So how did you guys get there together? Or what were your thoughts behind where she was choosing to give birth?
Sara, having come from a family of multiple younger sisters and all the time that she spent with caring for her niece, she knows kids. She knows, and so whereas I don't have a background with kids, I don't have any younger siblings, and so it was the notion of babies is very new to me. But with all the research she's been doing through podcasts and just her history from knowing kids, I had an intrinsic trust with what her opinions were, and we would talk about things and things would make sense to me. And so it was coming largely from the trust I had in her in approaching this whole topic that I was glad to go along with some of her preferences because she was a lot more knowledgeable about this than I was.
What did you think about the midwife when you met her?
She was very she would acquiesce to our requests in a lot of ways. And so she was accommodating to our requests. And I think having no pushback that you might get from kind of the standard medical community was very refreshing. And so you just intrinsically have a trust with her since she would just trust our preferences right off the gate. So I liked her off the bat, just like Sara did.
How about how you supported Sara throughout her pregnancy? So she mentioned like food was one way that you supported her and being willing to be quizzed on whatever podcast she was listening to. But what were some helpful things that helped you guys prepare together, and kind of how did you support her through her pregnancy?
Well, we certainly went to the My Essential Birth course together, and nutrition was a big deal. Like, for example, the wheatgrass is something I was kind of suggested, and that she's like, okay, I'll take that. And just as on that topic, during the delivery, the midwives commented that, wow, her bleeding was exceptionally low, and which, I thought there's plenty of blood, frankly, but their comments were that there was exceptionally low bleeding, which, all this wheatgrass she was taking, which is high in vitamin K, which helps blood clotting. Was that related? I don't know, but it's kind of like, okay, that's something, just the nutrition aspect and kind of ensuring that was, something I felt like I could have some influence on, help in that sense. I'm doing most of the cooking. But I was very pleased to see Sara's level of research ahead of time, just constantly listening to podcasts all the time. And I was very pleased to see that level of dedication ahead of time and preparation. So just allowing her the time to do that was what I felt like I could do. But otherwise, it was largely her journey that I was just kind of coming along on.
Well, he came with me to all the appointments. He came with me, except for a couple where he wasn't in town. He came with me to all the midwife appointments, and so he was in on it, and he would have a yellow notepad with the questions that we had written down throughout the week, and so he would ask those questions, and if he didn't understand something, he would ask, and the midwife was great about explaining it. So he was definitely a huge, huge part of the journey, and if I can just, confirm that part about that you said about trusting Tamra with no pushback. That was I would say that was number one. That was number one for us, because then when it came to birth, I wasn't worried about having to fight. I could just relax.
Okay, how about preparation? How did you guys prepare together? Sara, what did you do as far as like exercises and relaxation practice and labor rehearsal? Like what did your kind of daily, weekly, monthly look like, and as things got closer, and how did you guys do that together?
I asked this, okay, when we got married, I was really tense, right? And this guy gave me a massage, and it was one of the most painful experiences I've ever had. He doesn't hold back. So we decided that would be a good thing for me to practice breathing through pain. I said, give me massages and I'll breathe through the pain. And because we were able to practice that, a couple times a week, even before pregnancy and then during pregnancy, when my feet were hurting after a long day, he would give me a foot massage. It was my favorite part of the day. But I would have to practice those low moaning, keep the throat open, and then I would like wiggle my chin, and maybe practice feeling the breath, get my lips wet so I could feel the breath on my lips and focus on that feeling rather than what I was feeling in my feet. And after 9 months or more, it got to the point where he could massage my feet and he would say, oh, you looked like you were handling it just fine. And inside I'm thinking, yikes. But on the outside, I guess I was holding it together because I had found my technique for breathing through pain. And that helped quite a bit because I didn't have any problems with the contractions until we got to dilation.
Yeah. How about you, Matt? Was there anything you want to add to that? Any kind of preparation you guys did together that you feel like was really helpful or that other men listening would find really helpful?
The concepts of counter pressure, knowing those ahead of time, and the motions exactly where to push was just a great morsel to know. So I think that was the one thing, that the counter pressure concept, because ahead of time you're kind of like, well, what can I do? It's like, oh, that is something I can do. So you kind of cling to that. Say, okay, when I'm ready to go, and she starts needing help.
Yeah. All right. How about the birth? Take me from that very first contraction all the way through.
Okay. So I had been feeling really uncomfortable all day Saturday. So we went up to visit my sister on Saturday and I was so uncomfortable. And I didn't know I was experiencing labor probably till, hindsight is 20/20. I think I was experiencing early labor. I was leaning on countertops and swaying back and forth and breathing. Like, how could I not know? But I didn't know. So we spent that day out, and when I got out of the car, I had to slowly take my time to stand upright. And that lasted all day. And then in church the next morning, it was the most uncomfortable sermon I've ever listened to. I didn't want to be standing.
Well, you weren't listening much because you're so inwardly focused.
I didn't want to be sitting. I didn't want to be standing. I wanted to be home lying down. I still didn't get it. I went to the bathroom after the service and came back out and thought, oh no, I just peed myself. And because one of the girls, there's a troop of us who were pregnant at church at the same time, like, don't drink the water, right? We went, there was a girl who had gone to the hospital thinking her water had broken, but she had just peed herself. And I thought, okay, I'm going to learn from that. I'm not going to do the same thing. I'm going to go back in the bathroom and maintain dignity here. I was leaking puddles on my way into the bathroom. And then I'm standing in front of the toilet, leaving a puddle thinking, do I have to go this much? It doesn't smell like pee. And then one of the ladies walked in and she's cleaning up puddles. And I said, I'm sorry, it's me. And she says, we all do it. And I said, no, I'm leaking. Go get Matt. So she runs out and grabs Matt and he comes into the women's restroom. She's towing him in. She drags him in.
I grabbed her purse with her stuff in it.
He's standing there all awkward, not knowing what to do. And the ladies were so kind. They went and, because the pad that I had in my purse was not going to do anything. Mm-hmm. So they went and got some diapers from the nursery. And I was able to make an exit with dignity from church. And here's a little tip for preparation. When it hit maybe 36 weeks, I put waterproof pads in all the car seats, in the seats of the vehicles. Good thing, too, because I left a nice puddle on the seat in the way home. But when we got home, I was trying so hard to be relaxed, and let oxytocin be the main hormone. I didn't want to be stressed. But I couldn't help myself. I was nervous. It was happening. But we got home and we sat down and tried to eat some lunch. And I tried to just be calm I got up and cut Matt's hair because I figured we won't be able to cut hair for a long time. And it was true. He got pretty shaggy. So it was a good thing I cut his hair. And I was having contractions that really weren't too bad. I would stop, I think, just because out of more respect than out of necessity, just kind of stop and let it pass. And that night, I really was doing just fine. I had some contractions. They never got regular. So then Monday, they started getting a little stronger, but I was doing just fine. I was doing stretches. I started drinking red raspberry leaf tea. Monday, we started doing curb walking together. He walked up and down the street with me on Monday. I was starting to get tired. They were starting to get a little stronger. The midwife was checking in. Hey, getting regular? No? Okay. They never got regular. I remember Monday night being asleep and waking up to something feeling really sharp inside. It felt really sharp. And I leaped out of bed and rested on the chest of drawers and just kind of breathed and swayed and realized, oh, wow, that was really strong. What's happening? What is that? And I didn't know what it was. Now that I know, I was just dilating. It just felt so sharp inside. And from then on, when they still weren't coming regularly, it may be an hour, it may be 12 minutes, it may be anything. I just kind of felt nervous because I couldn't go through them on my side in bed from that point on. If little ones would come and go, but then sometimes it would be a big one that would make, my insides feel all sharp. And I realized it was just her head pushing on the cervix and I was dilating. And at that point, the only comfortable position I could find was on my hands and knees. So I think it was 3 a.m. Monday morning. I set out the yoga mat and I was just on my hands and knees, walking back and forth, just waiting in case it was a big one. And they started becoming, the majority of them were big. When I say big, I mean that I was dilating in each one. And as long as I was on hands and knees and breathing before they got, sharp, I was okay. If they got sharp before I was breathing, I would start to panic and maybe hyperventilate. But as long as I could start breathing first before it got sharp, I was okay. I could handle it. And I thought, okay, I guess we'll be here at home for a while yet because I'm still handling it just fine. It's got to get a lot worse, right? The midwife texted us Tuesday morning and said, why don't you guys just come on in? It's been long enough. Go ahead and come in. So we did. And I had a few contractions in the car. My contractions, probably because my water was broken, they were never that slow, gentle wave of I was expecting like a wave in the ocean where it gets harder and harder and harder, and then it's a peak, and then it backs off. It would come and go, and then come back really quickly, and then start to go, and then come back. And I'm thinking, now I know. It was probably, they were piled up. They were piled up. It was multiple contractions all happening at once. When we got to the birth center, I walked in, and she did a non-stress test. Yeah. And it was so cute because Phoebe noticed in the womb that whenever the midwife told me, whenever you feel her move, press this button to make a beep so that we can differentiate her movements from the contraction. Well, Phoebe noticed, hey, whenever I move, there's a beep. And so she started kicking, beep, 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 beep. She was having fun making noise in the womb. That was cute. But the midwife told us, hey, look, it's, your water broke and my insurance only lasts 60 hours since your water breaks. So if you don't have this baby by midnight, I'm going to have to transfer you to the hospital. And at that point, I broke down and had a big old sob fest. And I was crying on that shoulder because I was afraid. I'm afraid of the hospital. I don't want to have to fight for everything there. And I've got this habit, whenever I go in there, I'm in protect mode, anti-bear in there. I am not relaxed in the hospital. I'm afraid of all the things they're going to do. I'm afraid of all the things that might happen and that I don't want to happen. And I'm comfortable here and I don't want. to pay for both the birth center and the hospital. So we had a big old cry. And the midwife said, which I thought was interesting, yeah, she's noticed that pretty much every woman who comes in to give birth has to have a big old cry about something. So I thought, okay, well, here's mine.
Before actual progress occurs. It's a kind of a gate for things happening.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting to hear. So we decided with her to go ahead and start doing herbs. We did black,
blue cohosh and cottonwood root.
But she only gave me half the dosage because I told her I'm really sensitive. And then we went out and walked up and down stairs, curb walked back and forth. We were walking. The contractions were hard at this point. We came back, tried to take a nap because it was hot. It was August. We didn't sleep. But then the midwife came in and said, I know you're relaxed and comfortable and you want to be on all fours, but if you want to have this baby before midnight, you really should be sitting on the toilet, the dilation station. And so I went and sat on the toilet, and because I was comfortable on all fours, I could still make it through a contraction on all fours or on the yoga ball and be okay. I was breathing through them. He was doing counter pressure and it was okay. But on the toilet, that was not okay. That was painful. That was very painful. And so I don't even know how long I spent on there.
An hour and a half, maybe.
It seemed like forever. It seemed like a lifetime. That was awful. The toilet was awful. So if I can avoid the toilet next time, I'll be doing great. That's probably my goal for next time is not to sit on the toilet. But I had a birth playlist that I played while we were on there, and we were praying together, and I was moaning through them. And I don't think the midwife, because I had refused all cervical checks, I said no vaginal exams. I knew that things were happening, but I don't think she really could tell because
your contractions still were not consistent. And so we're just waiting for the contractions to become consistent and close together, but they were so sporadic. We just thought, well, okay, there's a lot more progress we need to make still.
Yeah. She was still waiting for that longer, closer, stronger together, 3 minutes apart, and they never got there. So at a certain point in time on the toilet, I started panicking, and I thought, I have got to get off this toilet. I'm going to get out of here. No more. I can't handle it anymore. I'm crying. I'm getting off this toilet. And then I realized I'm panicking. I'm probably in transition. So I got off the toilet, went over to the edge of the bed, and I told Matt, go get the midwife. I want the water now. And he did. And she said, okay, but the water will slow you down. So can I check you first to see if you're at a good progress point to get in water? Because it'll slow you down. And, the whole goal here is if you want to stay out of the hospital. So I said, okay. I'm yelling at her at this point. Fine. So I hopped down on the bed and boop, her head is right there. Phoebe's head was there. So she says, okay, I'll run the water in the tub.
Yeah, she was very surprised, almost this look of like, whoa, she had a lot more progress than we expected. So it's kind of the scramble to fill the tub all of a sudden and like, okay, things are happening.
Things are happening.
Even though contractions never got to being consistent and close together.
Mm-mm. I forgot the castor oil.
Oh, that's right.
We had the herbs weren't like working fast enough, so we also agreed to do castor oil. Wasn't excited about that.
It was hilarious. So the midwife came in with this big old vial of castor oil, kind of very, looking at it, got the scary eyes, scary look in her eyes, because that stuff's nasty, and she's just thinking it tastes awful. So she's kind of like, good luck at this, and kind of trepidatiously hands it over to Sara and like kind of closes the door and says, do what you need to get that stuff down. But Sara kind of like, she tastes a little bit and has this like, just kind of a shrug, and then just down the entire vial of this castor oil with nothing but a shrug. And so like a few seconds later, she opens the door like, I'm all done. And she's like, did you flush it down the toilet? And she couldn't believe that she had downed it, orally.
I've eaten a lot worse. Chlorophyll is worse.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, I mean, it was probably a good thing that I was on the toilet. Let's just put it that way. So, at a certain point in time, I'm kneeling by the edge of the bed thinking I'm in transition here. And all of a sudden, my body started pushing. I didn't even have anything to say about it. All of a sudden, it was just, I went from yelling at Matt like, I need the water, to roaring like a lion, pushing as hard as I can. And wow, that felt great. I was like, yes, I can do something now. And the midwife said, go ahead and up breathe. Okay, slow that down. Let's slow this down, and helped me get into the water where everything did slow down. It absolutely slowed down. Unfortunately, the tub was not as deep as I was hoping. I was hoping to be able to be on my knees and leaning on the edge, but I realized when I got into it, no, I can't. It's not deep enough. So for a little while, I pushed on my back in the tub, and Matt, I was in labor land in there. I know what you mean by labor land now. I didn't understand what labor land means. It felt like almost felt like being in a dream where I was aware of everything that was happening. I was not unaware. I knew what was going on. I heard everything they were saying, but I wasn't in a place to respond. So the midwife asked a couple of questions. I didn't reply. Matt played a song that we had lined up, and I don't think I responded at all, but I knew it was playing. And then at a certain point in time, I said, I want to get out. I don't feel like I'm making any progress. I don't think anything's happening. I'm not sure how long I was in the tub, maybe an hour. And then we got out, and I was standing, and I was leaning on Matt and pushing. And I'm at a certain point, it had been, I don't know, like 80 hours or something. It had been long, and I was tired. So my knees buckled, and they helped me on the bed, where the midwife could see I needed some help. So she put her fingers on Phoebe's head and was saying, okay, push here. And she was telling me, go ahead and don't let up while you're taking your breath. Push, and then continue to bear down while you inhale for the next breath. And it was interesting because if I had had any plans for pushing, if I had had any plans of how I'm going to breathe, what positions I want to be in during pushing, it all went out the window. And I was just kind of in almost this la-la land, where I would say la-la land probably from the outside, but on the inside, it was all very aware. I want to, lie this way. This is what feels good in the moment. Matt was holding my leg while I was on the bed, and he tried to go put it down for a second, maybe to reposition himself. And I said, no, you can't stop. You have to keep going. But I got exhausted after a while. And then after a little while, the contractions had been working for me, and I was pushing whether I wanted to or not. And I was tired enough, I just had to decide whether or not I was going to honor this contraction or not, if I'm going to push or not. But you have to because, she's in there, and it was very much, not so much, I would say that being on the toilet was painful, but pushing wasn't necessarily painful as much as it was just this mind game of having a bowling ball stuck inside me that I have to get this out. I wouldn't say that the pushing was painful as much as just panic inducing. And if I could stay relaxed, the midwife helped me with that a couple of times. I started, saying, I can't. And then she would tell me, no, Sarah, you can, change your language. You can. And so I would, I can do this. Thank you, Lord, that I can do this. I started thanking the Lord instead of, asking the Lord. I was just thanking the Lord for gratitude. That was helpful. But after about 2 hours, the midwife said, she's crowning. And I said, don't tell me that, because I didn't understand. I couldn't fathom what she was trying to say. And I was so done that I had wanted to breathe her out, right? I had wanted to let the body do it all. But at that point, when she says, one more push, she says, one more push, and she'll be out. And I did not wait for the next contraction. I just pushed. And sure enough, I tore, but I was done. So she came at early Wednesday morning. So I don't know anybody who's had a labor longer than that. But that was crazy. Very odd. I don't know anyone who's had that experience. It's very odd. I don't think anybody will ever after me.
And how was that for you, Matt? What were there, and both of you actually, like, how did Matt support you? And then how did you support her? Like, what were you noticing? Because it's true, you are extremely aware of everything going on, even though you're not saying anything, like you're just in your own land. But then Matthew, like, what were the things that you're like, I know she needs this, or what did you use in that labor time?
Well, just as general support in the sense of grabbing her water bottle, making sure she drinks, bringing her lap balm over to her, just being there is what the husband can do. And that's what I set out to do. I think what really surprised me, Sara had listened to all these podcasts about just being relaxed and trying to just, kind of breathe it out and all this. But there were moments where Sara let out a full guttural scream. And I wasn't expecting that. And so, watching your wife screaming in moments, it kind of can really take you back. And so I'm seeing that kind of wanting to do something, but there's really nothing I can do other than just be there. Meanwhile, the midwives have this sort of ho-hum sort of like, oh, this is normal expression on their face. And so I'm kind of between the two, just like taking in this moment, kind of wondering what to do. But really the answer is just being there is what Sara wanted. And I had my arm on her. And that's really all you can do. And that's what I did do. But I think the expectation, like I said, it surprised me when she was getting to a point of screaming, which I guess is kind of normal. And if there are any husbands out there who haven't gone through that before, just expect the unexpected in that capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you agree with that? Were there things that he was doing that was really helpful for you? Was it just him being there? Was it anything he said?
Yeah, him being there was just, I needed to smell him. I needed to feel him. Earlier on, he was feeding me. We had sandwiches and snacks, and he was feeding me. And then later on, he was giving me spoonfuls of honey. He was helping me up and down the stairs. He was, just, I didn't necessarily want to hear that's not, words of affirmation weren't necessarily what I wanted. Personally, I needed to smell him and feel him there. And just having his hands on me was what I needed. And that was huge.
There was a point where she started cramping, and having electrolytes handy was just, recommend to have some electrolytes handy if anyone's out there listening. That always helps with cramps for us anyway.
Yeah, that was kind of awful. She came out, and then I was thinking, oh yes, it's going to be a big relief. No, cramp. That was funny. And that she came out, and there was the midwife was trying to get her on my chest, but no, short cord. So she wound up on my belly. But he got to, the midwife told him to put his fingers on the cord.
One of the most magical experiences was to feel the cord when it was still pulsing. To feel Sara's heartbeat through the cord going into Phoebe at the moment. You just go, wow. And then mere moments later, the placenta's coming out, which was, all that heartbeat was pushing through. And just to see that so intimately was really special.
Yeah, that's really neat. I like that. Anything else you guys want to add about your birth story, and anything else that stands out to you or that you think could benefit other moms listening?
Be prepared for breastfeeding afterwards. I know that I heard a lot of people say that if you want to breastfeed, you need to invest in preparation for that. I heard a lot of people say that, but I thought, oh, it's natural. I'll be fine. Well, we were not fine. And I wish that I had invested more time. I bought an excellent course that I loved, the Robin Thompson method. It's so gentle.
Yeah. We had her on. She's amazing.
maybe I found out through you.
Maybe.
That's funny.
Amazing.
I probably did. I probably listened to your interview, and that's how I found out about it. I bought her course, but I didn't go through it with enough attention to be able to problem solve afterwards. But then again, a lot of postpartum depression. I'm not sure, maybe I could have thought my way out of a paper bag anyway. So being prepared for postpartum depression, being prepared for breastfeeding, and then we had a solid place and plan where our space was organized and set up. So we were ready to go when she came. We had food. He was feeding me again and bringing me water and hugging me. And when your hormones drop off after in the postpartum period, just be aware you're going to be crying about everything.
Yeah, that was one of the best bits of commentary I heard. Is actually from a placenta encapsulator. Told me, she's like, okay, after your daughter's born, it's like Sarah's going to be crying at everything. And she was saying in kind of a funny tone, just almost giggling at the notion of it. But I'm kind of like, okay. And so having heard that ahead of time, and then later on when Sara was in that postpartum and just, very, very emotional, I could go back to that comment and say, okay, this is expected. This is normal. I mean, having Phoebe cry is one thing, but when your wife is crying, that's another, harder thing to deal with. And so having the advice ahead of time that that's normal and expected was very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, do you have any final words, like your best advice for moms, best advice for dads from each of you?
Best advice for moms is, it's going to sound cliche. You need to follow your intuition. It's going to sound cliche. You need to follow your intuition, because there's so many people out there who will tell you, make sure make sure a breastfeeding session takes only an hour, and make sure you put them down before they're asleep, and make sure you do this and make sure you do that. They have to learn, babies have to learn. But the thing is, you're the mom, let your heart take care of your baby. You can take the advice, grab the advice, choose what works for you. And if something doesn't feel right to you, don't do it.
That's really good advice. I love that advice. How about advice for dads from you? Like, what would you say to other dads from mom's perspective?
I would say during pregnancy and after, give mom food, water, and hugs. Those are your responsibilities.
I love it.
Food, water, and hugs.
Yes. Yes, that's so good. Is Matt able to jump back on and give us his 2 cents real quick? Or
Matt, hun, do you have your 2 cents for moms and dads?
I think the learning how to do counter pressure ahead of time, being aware that postpartum is real, but it's quite normal, and having a waterproof pad in the front seat prior to your water breaking. And if you can insert wheatgrass in your diet ahead of time, it might help with bleeding. So those are the morsels I have.
Do you have any other advice for moms?
Advice for moms.
I know it's like dads are like, I probably shouldn't, but if there's anything that you can think that it'd be really helpful for moms to know from dad's perspective.
I was always glad to see you listening to podcasts and being so invested in research ahead of time. That gave me confidence to see, that much investment going on. I just really appreciate that about Sara.
Yeah, that's great. You guys are awesome. What a neat story. And clearly you guys love and support each other a ton, which is so fun just to be a part of all of that. So thank you for letting us listen in on your birth story and for all of your wisdom today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much.